This is the first time we saw Mark Kelly debate publicly. How would you rate his performance?
He was unexpectedly smooth. It seemed as though he was very comfortable in front of the camera. He didn't have some of the uptight characteristics that sometimes candidates have when they're put in that kind of forum for the first time. And he got across what he wanted to get across for each question that he was asked.
If we think back to 2018 when we saw Senator mcsally on the stage with Kirsten Sinema, would you say there's been some transformation or is it much of the same?
I think that thematically, she is carrying the party line much as she did before. I do think that in terms of the tone, the tone was much more relaxed than I think it had been in previous debates. She did get her jabs in. We heard her use the phrase "counterfeit Kelly" several times throughout the debate.
Counterfeit Kelly. He criticized the PPP loan.
So the name calling was there, but in terms of as an overall event, it was much more smooth and clear.
What's the value in the name calling? Because we've heard this on the national stage with the president referring to his opponent, Joe Biden.
I think that the president has set the tone in terms of the civility of discourse, and has changed what the norms are around public debate. In previous eras, it was unacceptable to call opponents names on stage, and that was considered a great faux pas if someone engaged in that type of rhetoric.
Did you see any common strategies between the two? I mean, they differed on so many levels, but anything that they shared in their communication styles?
Really, I thought the cadence, sometimes when people become quite emotional or quite anxious, you see the rapidity of their speech speed up. And so we didn't really see that. What I saw were two candidates who didn't get overly emotional, who certainly had messages they wanted to communicate, and they did so quite clearly. I think that if we were to look at their cadence, we would see again that even tone. And if we were look at the number of times that they made mistakes, very few and far between. I mean, overall, I think that when you take a look at this debate, it is a really a remarkably polished debate for one that takes place at the state level.
How important is it to stay on time? I mean, we had the time cues of 90 seconds for a response and then 45 seconds for a rebuttal. Sometimes the moderators are viewed as unfair because you have to cut off somebody, but there are rules to debate, so it's important to follow them.
As someone who debated in high school, I'm all for the rules when it comes to debate. The rules are negotiated usually ahead of time by the campaigns, and in order to keep that sense of fairness, it is important to stay within the bounds of the debate. Now, that does mean that it is more structured, and it isn't quite as organic as a conversation. We have give and take, and we might overlap each other here and there. But I think that after seeing the presidential debate last week, perhaps the candidates were particularly sensitive to wanting to respect those norms that say there are rules. We have agreed upon these rules for this type of engagement. Let's stick within this system.
Finally, Professor, I know that we will have debates here coming up in the next few weeks on the national or local platform, but you look at them through a very different lens than the average voter. So, what sorts of things would you like to offer people of what they could consider when they're watching these very public platforms?
One thing that I think that people should keep in mind is, are the candidates giving you part of their stump speech, or are they answering the question? Because those things don't always align. You can often tell when a candidate is just giving you something rehearsed. One of the beauties and importance of debate is that it really tests those candidates for their moments of spontaneity and authenticity, because we don't just elect someone to get speeches. We need to see how they think, as things are progressing, things that they might not anticipate. And so I would recommend thinking about what the moderators have asked and the extent to which the candidates have truly answered the questions.
Okay, Professor Kate Kenski from the U of A Department of Communication and the School of Government and Public Policy. Thanks so much.
Thank you.